Okay.
Great. All right. Uh, this is David Nitkin, Chair of the Maryland General Assembly Compensation Commission. We're live streaming. This is our second meeting of this group, a virtual meeting, Thursday, December 18th. Uh, and Introduction. I'm looking at the agenda. Thank you, Philip, for sending all the materials. What we've got is our agenda. We have introductions, which we may or may not need since we all know each other very well from last week. But we could, for anybody watching the live stream, you can see our names affiliated with our photos, and I believe that should suffice unless anybody feels differently. Um, we received at our last meeting, we discussed additional information that was to be provided to the commission from staff, and that has been provided. So I suggest that we review those supplemental exhibits and the additional background material, and then we will come up with the plan for how we want to discuss and what what we need to discuss and decide our next steps. So, Philip, I'll turn it over to you regarding what you have provided to us this week.
All right. We- all right. Yeah, so just some one quick update. We had mentioned last meeting we were going to update this exhibit. This was the interim legislative meetings. The information we had previously prepared was through September. This is also now updated through the meetings through this December. As you can see here, it's a significant bump. As I had indicated, most of the work in the interim tends to happen in that October, November, December range. And so in 2025, you have 158 scheduled meetings involving either legislative groups or bodies that have legislators assigned to them. And then for the additional materials, I will go through.
Is there any explanation for that bump? Is there a reasonable explanation, or I
So
shouldn't say reasonable?
typically, a lot of the information that is um, available is not available until the fall. A lot of legislation, if it's not related to budget or fiscal matters, takes effect October 1. And so a lot of it's driven by data availability. So when you have interim committees or other task forces or work groups, a lot of that work can't really be done in terms of a lot of the substance until later in the fall of the calendar year. And then a number of bodies are having meetings that are making decisions related to the upcoming legislative session. So I know last week we talked about spending affordability. They're actually meeting right now. So you have a number of interim legislative activities where just the timing kind of
Uh,
falls towards later in the calendar year, right before the upcoming session.
Sure, but this is a year over year increase, right? Like a significant increase in 2025 versus 2023 and 2024.
Yeah, and it's largely driven by just kind of what's going on in the world. So I think last time we ran this, the uh COVID year 2020, there was a lot. It was a
Yeah.
significant bump. You tend to see in um uh election interims kind of a decrease in some of the activity. So it's probably expected this upcoming interim with the election on the horizon that may happen. But again, it tends to be driven by what's going on in the
Okay.
world at large.
All right.
And then last time you all had asked to kind of see some info related to kind of broader economic conditions, and so we have um, pulled some data. We had some of our fiscal staff and DOS pull together some stuff. So this exhibit here, we have Changes in Maryland personal income, gross domestic product, and then the U.S. Consumer Price Index. So these are the yearly changes, and you have your average annual growth, and then your person, 2024 versus 2020 in terms of aggregate growth. The next exhibit we have would be the General Assembly salary increases. So this first column here, this is the existing resolution. So the prior commission had done a 4% increase in each of the first 2 years, and then a 2% increase in the second 2 years of the term. That is reflective of what you see here for the current legislative salaries. And then these subsequent columns, to the extent the info is available, so we don't have 25 and 26 yet, but you have here how those salaries would have been adjusted based on the changes we saw in Maryland personal income, Maryland gross domestic product, and then the US CPI. And then the next exhibit is those same adjustments on the salaries for the two presiding officers. And then this exhibit here would be options just kind of illustrating the possible adjustments for the next term based on the average annual growth rate for each of those metrics, just as kind
of. Let's go back to 45 for a second, please. So my reading of this, is it a fair reading that the General Assembly salaries well, I guess we have the NA in here for 25 and 26, but at least for 23 and 24 did not keep pace with inflation, depending on how you define inflation. So consumer price index did not keep pace. Maryland gross domestic product did not keep pace, and Maryland personal income did not keep pace. I mean, is that fair to say that the increase approved by the prior commission did not allow, the result of that was General Assembly salaries not keeping pace with inflation? Is that a fair statement?
Right. And this is also, just to be clear, this is showing, so the prior commission had granted some increases. The commission before that had not. So the salaries have been stagnant. So this is kind of showing, even going back from 2020, how the salaries have lagged based on those metrics. But yes, you're correct. In each of those instances for those metrics, the growth in those metrics exceeded the growth in the legislative compensation.
Mr. Slater has his hand up, and I'll use that as an opportunity to remind folks that we don't have the chat function is not enabled for these meetings. So Mr. Slater has followed the rules as previously stated at our first meeting and raised his hand. So thanks, Tom.
I just wanted to ask Philip, I understand you don't have the figures for 2025 and 26.
Mm-hmm.
You have a guesstimate. You have a feeling for what the CPI change or the GDP or
I believe this morning,
has it gone up more or less, or what do you think?
Yeah, this morning I saw, I believe I think it was the November data was released for Department of Labor, and that was, I believe, around a 2.7 CPI change for the 12 months. So it's, somewhere in that range, likely if you're extending it through, December.
Thank you.
Let me also ask a question for the folks for staff and for folks who were on the commission last time. Do you recall the thought process, the logic behind the bifurcation of a 4% in the first 2 years and 2% in the second 2 years? Do you recall how that came about?
I would generally say, David, that Mr. Chairman, that there was an acknowledgement of a need to catch up a little bit, given the lack of action by the prior commission, which, you could argue is understandable given the circumstances. So in looking at the salary levels and the lack of change over the prior couple of years, in those circumstances, there was an argument that eventually convinced the majority of the commission members to kind of front load the actions. And that's my recollection of what kind of guided the decision.
Thank you. So there was a fair amount of discussion that previously that it had been 0 for 4 years, and that was sort of something that had been taken into account.
Yeah, there was. I think I'm not sure. Philip and Simon were involved. I'm not sure if anybody else was on this group. There were some pretty heated conversations. Just, there were some arguments about like, whether or not it's a full-time job. And I would also say that like being average or in the middle of the pack, as it related to compensation wasn't necessarily a goal of most of the commission members. There was a willingness to, be in the top 25% or the top quartile, whatever, however you want to describe it. And like in some of the rankings that you've seen on some of the other exhibits, like when we're 13th or 12th or, 15th, like I think that's a reflection. And like sometimes when you go through these compensation exercises, particularly for executives, like the headhunters and the consultants and the search consultants will say like, this is the 50th percentile, this is the median. But like as a preferred employer or depending on the type of organization you're advising, like you're not necessarily like looking to be in the middle of the pack. You're looking to be in the top half of the pack and, as close to the top as to the middle, that like to just, that was, I'm not articulating this like great, because it was 4 years ago, but there was a little bit of an acknowledgement of like, you get what you pay for. And, we want to be on the more competitive side, given the expectations, given the demands, given the workload, given the interest in attracting good people to serve and to continue serving.
Philip, did we get to 47 yet, or did I? Simon, you have your hand up, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, echo what Matt said. I think, one of the things that we did as staff last time around, and I'm conscious that I'm wearing 2 hats, like retrospectively as a staffer, we did try and find out about workload. And the data that was presented by Philip was the first time that anybody had looked at actual workload, which showed that, during session, this is a full-time job. And during the interim, a lot of people still worked at this, a good 40 hours a week. And I think to Matt's point, there was definitely a sense that, you want to, at this point, even though it's not a full-time legislature, you wanted to be kind of making sure the salaries were at the higher end of the group that were considered, hybrid. And yeah, there was a catch-up element to it as well. There'd been the 4 years with 0. So I think that all told, that was the reason to get that slight bump up front, and then to move back to a more, normal type of cost of living, which we use the term cost of living increase a lot. It's not really a cost of living increase. It's whatever salary increase is given. That's true for state employees and for the legislators. There's no necessarily strong tie to a particular index, but I think that's where we came. The commission came from last time around.
Thank you. Related to that, as we get further into the discussion, when we look at the state rankings, Philip, do we know? So we know that that's a point in time. Uh, do we have data? Do we know data on what other peer states will do going forward? Like if this group wanted to say, okay, here's our like we've said, here's our peer jurisdictions, and
Mhm.
there's an exhibit on that of like, here's a group of states with hybrid legend. I forget what the exhibit is, but it's something like here's a group of states that
Right.
have a operating budget within $15 million of Maryland's, right? So that's here's our 10 peer group. I forget if all those are hybrid or some are full time or not. Like, do
Right.
we know? Is there or
It's
how hard would it be to get like what they're going to do in 27, 28, 20?
that is probably not something we would be able to pick out in terms of what they're planning on doing. I will say it's generally difficult to find a good apples to apples. You'll see this often when you're discussing like pension benefits, and you'll have people wanting to compare what we do in Maryland versus what they do in Pennsylvania or Massachusetts, and there's a number of factors, and with this, because of the nature of how the legislative salaries are set, you have some states that use a commission process, you have some that the legislature just does it themselves, you have some where it's set in the Constitution, and then
Right,
you also, I think, there's other factors in too. It's what kind of budget is the state working with? That I think is probably fairly pertinent. How much money are the elected officials entrusted with, being fiduciaries of for their citizens? But then again, you have states in terms of the number of legislative members that vary widely. I think it's New Hampshire or Vermont. There's something like almost 500 members
New
in
Hampshire,
their
New
in their
Hampshire.
legislative body. So
Yeah.
it's hard to kind of take even a menu of things and get a decent way to compare the apples to apples. And I think that's probably part of why we discussion last time was kind of, are there some kind of objective metrics like CPI, and we've also added in the personal income and GDP, which are Maryland based metrics that you can look to and give whatever weight you want.
Do you mind going to exhibit 47?
Sure.
Before we do that, I have my hand up. I don't know if you can.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed
That's
that.
okay.
No, it's hid in the purple there.
With the back, I know, with the background.
Sorry, Ms. Waller, Commissioner
No
Waller.
problem.
Please go ahead.
So, question. I know we did see on one of the prior exhibits kind of laid out the compensation that's given to state employee staff. How much, and this is probably for the prior, how much do we kind of take a look at that and kind of compare to make sure we're keeping up or far ahead, or do we even consider like raises and compensation given to state employees?
That was, I believe, from my recollection, like part of the discussion that was going on last time. There had been a period of stagnant salaries, and then there were and also in prior iterations of the commission, you had periods of time where state government employees had flat salary growth, or at times were even being furloughed. And so, those are factors that are considered. And I know part of the discussion last time was, the legislative salaries have been fairly stagnant, and the general employee compensation had been itself trying to be caught up after years of stagnation. But as the nature of this commission, being that the legislative body doesn't control their compensation, I think it's more kind of a guide historically in terms of the health of the state's economy.
Okay, thanks.
Tom has his hand up again.
So as I was looking at the materials in terms of comparison to other states, I looked at Minnesota and Washington as comparable budgets, and I don't want this to be a slur, but not southern states, states that want to emulate in terms of their commitment to good government and everything. And I one of my goals would be to see that we keep pace at least with Minnesota and Washington, because I think they're similar to us. Another observation based on what was just said is the salary increase for legislators was 8.2% over 4 years, if I remember correctly. And it was amazing to me, the increase in salaries for executive department heads. I mean, it was 80% for veterans, budget management, information technology, general services, and a whole bunch, and over 100% for natural resources, labor, and housing. So, I mean, part of the goal, it seems to me, is the legislature has to be able to not compete, but at least be an equal branch of government with the executive. And the executives have been getting huge salary increases. So, I mean, that's an interest of mine, is to make sure that the legislature is able to hold its own in regard to the executive.
Thank you. Matt?
Just as it relates to the executive branch and the agency leadership, just based on my own knowledge as a cabinet member's spouse at one point in time, the data that's included in the packet for the executive branch cabinet secretaries, I think, represented the high end of the executive salary range. And the percentage growth, it's not an apples to apples comparison in terms of the change in the legislator salaries versus the change in the cabinet secretary salaries. So the range increased, but the salaries did not increase by that. I mean, I don't think that undercuts the point at all about keeping pace and, taking in as many of those data points as possible. But there weren't 80% increases in cabinet salary secretaries. That 80% figure, I think, refers to the range. And then I would just add that, in terms of, and just because this is how it happened last time, it doesn't mean how it should happen going forward. I think when Philip kind of stacks up the change in personal income, the change in GDP, the change in CPI, those are all kind of points and benchmarks. And, what I think the last commission found most persuasive was, are we outliers? Are we really crazy outliers when you look nationally? And I think the answer was no. And then the juxtaposition of the actions taken for the represented workforce of the state were important, because in just informal conversations with members of the General Assembly through the years, I think there's a little bit of hesitancy in terms of them seeing annual adjustments that exceed what the rank and file employee of the state is making. There's a real kind of awareness and sensitivity to that. So the 4 and the 4 were unusual, historical increases, but there was a catch-up mentality. There had been some significant salary actions taken recently at that point in time for represented employees. And, if the norm had always been 2%, as kind of an annual adjustment, that still didn't capture the step increases that 85 to 90% of state employees were getting. So the 2% felt consistent with norms, and it was still under what the vast majority of state employees were getting. And just the last thing I was going to ask, and I don't remember if we have looked at this before, Philip, but can can the commission make a recommendation that essentially says like if a COLA is like if we said like let's do 2% next year for legislators, and then ultimately the state through the budget process, like they decided to pull the 2% out or not do steps. Can our recommendation be contingent, or do we just have to make a straight up recommendation and then with the General Assembly have to like roll it back itself?
So kind of like a set increase, but with like a collar or a
Yeah.
pullback. I'd have to look into. I probably need to check in with the AG on that. The only potential issue I could see is whether that is kind of circumventing the nature of this commission process. And so, the commission is supposed to set the salaries. And so if there's a contingency related to a compensation action that the legislature is in control of, but if it's if it works to only reduce, there may be some nuance there, but I'd have to probably check and see if that tying it to something the legislature has control over versus, here's an increase, but if CPI is, less than that, bring it down to CPI as a more objective factor, maybe more likely to be something you could do.
Okay.
So before I thank you, Matt. Before I go to Tom again and then Simon, Matt outlined sort of the way I was thinking about this for our discussion going forward, but I'm open to suggestions. We have a lot of data. I think I'd like to hear after we go through the exhibits and these next round of questionings from all the commission members what you consider the most important criteria or the most important data that we can sort of maybe structure our discussion around that. I think the 2 points that Matt raised were, kind of the way I've been thinking about this, and maybe some of you also. A, where are we? Where is Maryland nationally? Where do we want to be? And B, how does it align with the overall workforce and represented employees? And to me, those I think are personally those are two important criteria. But I'd love to hear. And Tom had stated a couple others that he thinks are were different than that. He expressed the point about comparing to executive salary, and then the peer states that he wanted to compare us to, which is also a good comparison. So I'd love for us all to say, like, hey, what do we think are the criteria we need to measure ourselves against based on all this data we have, and then we can structure the conversation around that. But let me go to Tom, who had his hand up again, and then Simon, please.
So Matt's comments I identify with, and the big thing that's looming in the background that I'm struggling with how to deal with is a $1.4 billion deficit. And do we recommend significant increases in salaries for the legislature, which deservedly should be the case? But then what happens if there's a big cut in the state budget and it affects employees of the state? That's not a good look.
Right. And Tom,
big increases for legislators, and the poor
correct
employees are suffering. So Tom,
if you look 2 years ahead of that, 1.4 billion is going to be filled immediately by the governor and by his budget secretary, and then the fiscal years after that, 2028, 29, you're in the $3 to $4 billion range in a structural deficit. And as the blueprint ramps up, I will say, as an editorial side, the blueprint that the General Assembly voted for.
The only way, another way to look at it is the amount of money that's spent for legislative salaries is very, very small in the whole budget. So it's like hardly a ripple, but still it's a bad look if state employees get just a regular advance, but not a pay raise. I'm struggling with how to reconcile that.
Yep. Simon, did you have something to add? No? Hand down at this point? Okay. Could we go to 47, please, Philip? So I want to make sure I understand the next term, 27, 28, 29, 30. Those would be numbers if the average annual growth rate in that inflation area was applied each year annually. Is that what I'm looking at?
Correct.
So for the first column, growth in personal income, we take a 5.5% factor, which is with the apples to apples would be compared to 4422. Is that correct?
For what was done last term, yes.
Yeah, compared to the last cycle. But so if we were to say, hey, legislative salaries need to keep pace, or if it was the decision that said this commission decides we should keep pace, let's pick a number with the average increase in growth in CPI, the last column, that would be 4.9 applied each year, and this is what results from that.
Right. And again, these were, just to kind of illustrate what.
Absolutely. I'm not saying this is a
factor, because again, you're
right. Yeah.
As was noted last time, you're in that tough spot of being at a point in time where you know what happened before and you have no idea what's coming.
Right.
Future CPI could be twice that, it could be half that, it could be zero.
Right. All right. So let's see. Did we go through 46 was presiding office, 47. Yeah, that was the last. And then is there another exhibit after that?
We didn't run this for the presiding officers, but
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Whatever, it should be consistent. Probably historically, that's how it's worked. So, if you come to a consensus on.
All right. So now we have all the exhibits and data that we had asked you for so far.
Yes.
All right. So I do suggest I'm open to suggestions, but I would love to hear from members of the commission what factors they think are what are the bucket areas we should be discussing, or what factors are most important to you. Do you mind if I go around? I hate to put people on the spot. If you feel free to pass if you want to pass, but Ms. Cyrus, would you like to weigh in? I've got Cyrus, Ms. Cyrus, Zena Pierre, Simon Powell. I'd love to hear sort of what's on your mind as what's most important.
And
if you want to pass, that's fine.
I'm not going to pass. I'm not going to pass. Just looking at the data from the exhibits we've been given, I think the previous commission did a pretty good job of placement as far as our ranking kind of status part goes. Most of the states that were ranked above us were full-time. They had a lot of full-time legislation. And so we're ranked, I think, pretty well as far as that piece goes. Beyond that, I was really struggling, like I think it was Tom mentioned, about the budget and kind of the next steps there. Beyond that, I hadn't really generated an opinion on what other additional factors we should use.
So let me the ranking. Anybody remember off the top of their head what exhibit number that is? Because then
14,
this sort of
14
go ahead, yeah.
On page 25.
All right, let's. Do you mind displaying that again?
Yeah, let me get there. I can.
The one I used mostly was the one that had all of the different factors involved. Not sure which.
I was looking at the bar. I thought the bar graph, which had us at 13th. All right, so that is.
This one also has us at 13.
Yeah, we're still at 13. So if you go,
Yeah,
this
okay.
is order, if you go with the first column.
Gotcha. Right. So New York is full time, right? And it's California is full time, and Pennsylvania is full time, and Michigan is full time.
Michigan is.
And then if we were looking at what Tom said, I haven't thought of it this way. Minnesota is right below us, 14th,
Full-
and Washington is right above us, or a couple places above us, at 10th. Yeah. Tom, since you raised this, well, and you said the commission last time was it a goal, Philip? But I look, it doesn't really matter. But what was the goal to say Maryland should be in the top quartile because of our expectations? Did that seem to be a standard that was discussed last time?
I mean, as Commissioner Pallett noted, there was more focus last time around in terms of the workload. And so that's when we started pulling information in terms of, interim meetings, pieces of legislation. I think last time we noted that even if you're looking at that, the number of bills introduced and passed looks fairly consistent, but embedded in that data, there's about a 400 bump.
Can I play devil's advocate on that for a second? Doesn't the General Assembly control their own workload?
So the Senate
don't they decide how many pieces of legislation they introduce? Don't they decide how many meetings they're going to have?
So in the Senate, starting in 2021, they implemented through their rules process limitations on the number of bills a member could request and introduce. The House does not have limitations.
But what I'm saying is you don't need I mean, they could self-limit if they want to.
They could.
The number of bills are based on what they decide to introduce.
They could. They could. Historically, every bill that has been introduced by the on-time deadline for introduction has been given a hearing. And then, they do what they do with as they work through.
And a committee chair could say, I don't want to have these site visits in October, correct?
Correct. Yeah, certainly things like site visits and exploratory things, those will fluctuate, as I said, depending on what's going on in the world. Other things like task forces, commissions, joint legislative bodies, things like that, where there's action taken. Those are not really discretionary.
Well, other than if they created the task force themselves.
Correct.
Like in the BRFA or something.
Yes. And that does happen. There are instances when, a group is created and it ends up not actually meeting. It's not common, but it does happen.
Well, all right. Okay, so thank you, Ms. Cyrus. I mean, I think that's right. I think this chart was so the other interesting thing. So I'm sorry, go right there. The one that had it lined out with the bar chart, was it right? Was it before?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there we go. All right. So that's a graphical representation,
yeah.
I think, of the same chart.
Right.
Now, the other interesting thing is where we are as a percent of state median income as for a General Assembly member, which is much lower. I think we're in like the lower third in that.
Mm-hmm. We have the breakdown, and
there you go. You just went by it.
All right. We also have
another bar
later on. We have
that was adjusted for cost of living, and then there's a bar graph of percentage of median income in the state. So New York 40. Is at what's that?
24.
Page 40, exhibit 22.
So that is interesting and shows us, toward the tail.
Right.
What is Maine? Maine is hybrid, part-time light. I think people in Maine don't earn a lot of money, is what it is.
If it's of interest, I know later on, I think it's exhibit 37. We have so this is the jurisdictional breakdown.
Oh, right.
So you have at the bottom.
Right.
So that's the actual dollar amounts, and then You can see the variation among the jurisdictions.
Dr. Pierre, what would you say are the most important criteria for you, or what? I guess I'll phrase it that way: the most important criteria for you.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak. I think what's really important to me is the economic parity of how these members who do work, part-time on paper, but full-time throughout the year. And I recognize that there has to be some parity and fairness in terms of state employees as well. These are the people that impact us from a policy perspective and from this legislative body, which impacts our communities. And we do want to attract the best and the brightest, but also keep the best and the brightest that are, currently existing in the General Assembly. And so for me, it's really a couple of things. That I think, we should look at, and I know we are, and that's one is cost of living and economic condition. We know that we're in a dispensation of time where we know that last year that there was a huge deficit of over $3 billion, and thankfully this year it's more than it's less than half at this point. But I heard you, Mr. Chair, talk about that there's going to be a potential increase in that. I think that, these members work really hard and they represent their communities. And I recognize that there has to be a level of, without being redundant, parity in terms of everyone having an opportunity to be able to afford the places where they live and where they work. I've seen these, as many of us, and we have a former member on the phone, on the commission here, how hard these members work. And I just personally believe that we got to continue in the efforts of finding ways to increase these opportunities. We know that for a better salary, we know that California is full-time. We see the numbers in Michigan and some of these places, but I would imagine and dare to say that California, amongst the rank, is a place where properties and cost of living is extremely expensive, but so is Maryland. And so we got to find a way to create an opportunity for the people to be able to do their work and be able to be compensated as well and not struggle in doing their work. Secondly, I heard about the time and the workload, and if they have to, create so many or submit so many bills, et cetera. All of that, a lot of the bills are motivated by the people that they serve. And so when a person comes in to seek support of certain things, they are responding to the people that they represent. And so that's one thing. And again, transparency, we that's why we're here, to create this opportunity for transparency and accountability. But with all of that, I think that the compensation package really should resemble the level of work that's being put in and day out from these members. And so I'm hoping that we will find a way to see how these opportunities to increase can be better than 2%. Because when you look at 2000, I think it was 2020, 21, 22 was zero. And they still worked and did the work for the people that they represent. And now we're at a place where we have an opportunity to enhance this in a way that can give people the pride and knowing that I'm here, I'm representing the people, but I'm also able to make ends meet in some regard, because not everyone has a business. Not everyone is able to even have a full-time job. And I know this is a little off subject, and I'm going to shut up after these three seconds. There are members that, try to get employment. but oftentimes the employment, and I know this is separate from this commission, is not always approved through, ethics. It may not be in compliance because of, maybe some of the things that they're doing within the General Assembly. And we've got to find a way to create these moments of opportunity to allow these members to do the work that they do. They're proud to be where they are. And we should give them the pride in knowing that they are able to do so without the mindset of struggling while they're doing it.
Thank you so much for that. Philip, was one of the exhibits the outside employment of General Assembly members? I'm not sure if we saw that.
No, we can get you that information. That was not included in the exhibits.
Had it been included in prior years? I thought a survey. I thought I saw somewhere a survey had been done about whether number of retirees, number who don't have another job, number who do have outside employment.
Yeah, last time we had that, we had some data that we could compare kind of nationally, which is not available this time around. But we can get we have breakdowns for the General Assembly members in terms of employment, education, a lot of demographic info that I can get out to you all.
Employment being their other current employment, in addition to being. Do they have to file that with the Ethics Commission?
I believe that is required. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Chair, and hopefully that can be something on the table because it's real. I mean, I've talked to members who have been unemployed for a very long time because they just can't seem to find the right job that will allow them to be in compliance.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Philip, if we could get that, I know we have a couple of weeks between now and our final meeting. What we know about legislative employment and what they have reported to the Ethics Commission.
Right.
I think that'd be good for this commission to have. Mr. Powell, Commissioner Powell, I will move on to you about what you consider to be the most important factors as you think about this.
Yeah, thank you. Very briefly, first of all, when it comes to budget deficits at this time of year, we're always predicting them, and the budgets always get balanced. I'll point that out. And that's a constitutional requirement as well. I did like the chart that Commissioner Cyrus pointed to, Exhibit 14. I looked at that chart specifically that shows us around 13th, in terms of the General Assembly salaries. Every single one of those states, bar one, above us, and including those below us, got increases between 21 and 24. And we still stayed where we were. So, if that's where we want to be, if that's what the commission thinks that's where they want salaries to be, well, that's what the salary increases achieved. But it means, I suspect that, other states, they'll continue to get some kind of increases, which means if this commission doesn't take some form of action, despite the budget situation that, is apparent right now, then we'll see Maryland slip. And, that's my concern is that, my experience with legislators was as a staff person, and, they work very hard. And, I think that's where the state's situated in terms of its full-time, part-time status, in terms of salary, is probably reasonable. It's been pretty steady for a number of years now. So I think that's the commission's task, is how they to achieve, maintain where we're at, knowing that that's probably going to mean some kind of increase despite the external pressures. Thank you.
Thanks. I think I like that. I appreciate what you said. And I think what you're saying, just to paraphrase it, is that the last commission did a pretty good job of, if that was the objective, and we could have this discussion after we all talk about whether we agree as a principle that that's where we should be and where we want to stay. And that I think what I also hear you saying is that, to stay there, a zero or minimal increase would be problematic. Would not most likely help us stay there or reach that objective. Tom, do you have more to you kind of did lay out what was most important to you. You can reiterate it or rephrase it as you see fit.
Just quickly, keep pace, stay in the top uh, portion of the states, be mindful of state employees and their salaries, and try to anticipate the budget shortfalls. And then
Yeah.
one other comment, and I don't know that it's part of our purview, but I think the legislature is terribly understaffed. That they would do a much better job if they had more staff that could assist them. I don't know whether we have anything to do with that, but that's just my thought.
Tom, I will say as an aside, when I reviewed, when I knew I would have the honor of taking on this assignment, I reviewed last year's work and testimony, and there, in fact, was testimony by a gentleman who worked in a legislative office who had sought that there'd be enough money for those salaries for staffers to keep pace with. It's a little bit different issue of a total amount of staffing, but someone made that a person very directly affected by it made that point 4 years ago as well. I think it's a good point. Matt, what would you like to add? What criteria you think are most important? You kind of laid it out also. Maybe you could repeat it for us.
I would just say very briefly, 4 years ago and now, and then factoring in like personal experience and exposure, I'm more than convinced this is a big job, in terms of the hours, the workload, and the productivity of legislators. Similarly, I'm convinced that the existing compensation for legislators is not excessive. Like when you compare it to other states, locals, indices, the unique cost of living challenges of being in Maryland, which are higher than a lot of other places. So kind of taking like it's a big job and it's not excessive compensation. Like what's most important for me is that what the commission recommends is going to be either inside of or no more than what is likely to happen for the state workforce. I think that's an important consideration for me. And the second consideration is given the struggles of the time and the difficulties and the looming kind of challenges fiscally, that I think it would make sense to think about relatively backloading actions, in terms of like, you don't have to take 4 equal sized actions that to the extent, we can reach a consensus, it might be more backloaded in years 3 and 4 as opposed to 1 and 2. And I say that in that, people always talk about these 100-year storms, and it feels like the 100-year storms happen every 100 days now. It's like that 100 years doesn't mean what it used to mean. We've had the Great Recession, we've had COVID, which might be like 2 of like the biggest jolts that have happened, at the state level in, 100 years. Like this is a really, really challenging time, and I don't want to minimize that, but we have to get to some level of like normalcy and regular activity. And I think one of the reasons that the commission is set up the way that it is that we have to take a long view. We have to make tough decisions, be willing to stand by them. And I think like taking positive action makes sense, but not taking like too positive an action that it's going to be like so far beyond what the regular workforce is, I think is important, because I think that puts the General Assembly in a very difficult position. And while the cost of making adjustments for the General Assembly is relatively modest, even if we have a very, very strong business case for it, the cost of doing the same thing for the whole workforce might be prohibitive. And I just don't want to put something out there that creates difficulty for the General Assembly, because it's not something that there's a reasonable path to replicating for the whole workforce.
Right. Thank you for that. I do note, I believe we're flying blind on what we think the increase for the general workforce is, unless folks have some sort of inside information, or are we making a guesstimate, or, I'm not sure. I agree with that guardrail, and I think we're gonna have to decide what we think where that guardrail gets planted.
Well, I mean, the wage reopeners will be settled by December 31st. Granted, the budget won't be introduced for a few weeks, still, but I think between DLS and the commission, we should know if the wage reopeners with the bargaining units have settled. And I think the one existing open contract is Loyola, which is also, I think, supposed to settle by December 31st.
You think that's likely? Is there risk that it won't happen, or you think we'll have that information? Philip, do you have a sense? Joe?
I wouldn't be able to speak to that. I mean, if the
Okay.
deadlines are the end of the
All
year,
right.
ideally.
So we might have, we
able to
we
rely
may
on
well
that.
have more. We may well have that data point when we reconvene in January, or it would be the expectation that we have it.
Right.
I mean, Mr. Chair, I think you could, this is just one potential path. I think that we could conceivably start to talk about scenarios like today, whether it's like, we kick around different ideas, different scenarios, and we would potentially, when we get together for the third and hopefully final meeting, we might have like that additional data point, which might validate a scenario that we might have consensus forming around, or it might be, wow, like, there's going to be nothing next year. Like we can't propose,
Right.
3% for the General Assembly. And then we could revise, the scenarios or the discussion at that third meeting.
I like that. I think I'd like us to get to some scenarios at the at the 66% mark of our discussion today after we finish this round. Thank you. Uh, uh, Commissioner King, would you like to weigh in on your view on the most important criteria?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of great points have been made. I probably lean closest to Commissioner Pierre in her comments. But I also think that what Commissioner Gallagher said about being sensitive to the workforce in general in the state's important. I think for me, in my experience, I know a handful, if not more, of legislators that have left the General Assembly to, quotation, go make money. Because it's just hard to live off, $50,000, $60,000 a year in this state without either another job or a spouse who is, gainfully employed. And so you hate to you hate to lose good people because they just can't pay the bills doing a job that they love or that they're very good at. And you hate to see that. The other broader comment that I would make is, and I'd love to see the data on this, but at least from my 4 years in the legislature, the makeup of the legislature tended to be either a lot of attorneys who could schedule their work, their caseload around their, business. So that profession lends itself to a little bit more flexibility, or retirees who had worked for 30 years and now could afford to take on a part-time job in the hours. And I think often back to my old friend Mike Bush, who would give me the history lessons of the General Assembly of, it was originally designed to represent all walks of life, and the longshoreman would come in for the legislative session, and the farmer would come in, and this, that, and over the years, right, that has morphed into, well, who can really afford to do the job and who can work around their profession to be able to do this. And I feel like a legislative body is best when it's most diverse in as many ways as possible, from as many walks of life, as many professions as you can put together in one room to get consensus to make good policy. And I get concerned that without having the right economic background to be able to support these people, we too often find ourselves with a lot of lawyers and some retired firefighters who are already on a pension, right? And what are you left with of the people who actually represent their districts in a broader sense? So we're not going to tackle that on this commission, obviously, but I do think compensation plays a role in the type of individual and the professions that are represented in the legislative body. And so, with that being said, I side on being as aggressive as we can within realistic benchmarks to try to attract great people, to try to diversify the membership as much as we can. And, there's been a lot of scandals in Maryland in politics over the years, mostly surrounded around bribery and cash. And why are those individuals doing those things? Because they're not making enough money to pay the bills, quite frankly. And that's not, not everyone, but you hate to see that. And maybe we can eliminate some of that if people feel like they're compensated and can pay the bills without having to do things that are unethical or untoward to make additional money. Again, that's a much broader topic, obviously, than we're here to cover, but I think they all tie together, right? I think if at the end of the day, the people in these positions are paid well and don't have to worry about those things, they become better legislators and they put more time into the job. So that's a lot to throw at you, but
no, that's a broad perspective, and I don't think anybody would disagree with anything you said. Thank you for contributing all of that. Appreciate it. Ms. Wilder, and then Ms. Reynolds after that. Commissioner Wilder, love to hear from you what you think the driving factors are.
Yeah, well, I think, other commissioners have certainly expressed a lot of what I've been thinking, and they've expressed it well. So I will, keep it brief. So I think it's important for priorities for me to make sure that the state of Maryland keeps pace where they set in relation to other states, to be mindful of the state employees and workforce and compensation, I think is very important, as has been stated. To be mindful of the budget. It may not be the driving force, but certainly we have to keep in mind the budget and potential deficits and that kind of thing. And we also need to consider the message that we send to legislators and those who we want to attract. If it doesn't look like it is profitable, if it's something that they can and do as well as raise their families here in the state of Maryland, then we'd be losing a lot of really good, very important voices in the legislature. So I'd like to, be sure that we make it as attractive as we can within the guardrails and limitations. So that's kind of where I am.
Thank you. Well said. Appreciate it. Lindsay, would you like to add?
Absolutely. So I think the great thing about going last is you can echo what everyone else said. So I appreciate all of your input. And I did not expect that Commissioner Keene would beat me to the Mike Bush story, which I was going to talk about the value of the civic legislature as well. But I think fundamentally what we, in agreeing with everybody, I think there is one point we haven't talked about, and that is that fundamentally over the last 15 years, these jobs have changed, right? If you're making decisions about running for the legislature, it's no longer about whether or not you have a spouse that can help compensate with the salary, or whether, you have a job that will allow you to take on that extra role. To attract top talent, we have to acknowledge that these jobs are not only harder, but they're working within an environment where there are also risks that weren't there 15 or 20 years ago. And so I think, when we think about keeping pace with other states, when we think about making certain that we don't create an avenue at which these salaries become higher than they should be because of the budget and other state employees, and take all that into consideration, I do think how we think about the percentage that those salaries should be raised should take into account to get the top talent to run for these seats, to put in this work, to serve the citizens of Maryland, requires a lot of thinking on the part of the people who want to run these days, and what they have to make decisions about. And so I really like Commissioner Gallagher's position on the approach to how he thinks about it. And I would just encourage us to keep in mind that there are other things that go into people's decisions about running for office than just how much money they make while they're there, the impact on their family, the risks to them and their family. And I think to get top tier talent, we have to take into consideration all those things.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So on my other screen, I still have exhibit 14, excuse me, relative standing of legislative salaries that we've discussed a lot. And I think almost it feels like it's driven a lot of this conversation. I think rightfully so, as I'm hearing it. Our percent salary change from 21 to 24 was not super high. It was on the lower end of a lot of the states above us. And yet we basically maintain a ranking at number 13 in relative standings. I wonder if it might be valuable to say that we reach consensus as a guidepost. One of the guideposts as we're discussing this, that we think Maryland should at least be there. I would struggle with I'm thinking through the right language, but I feel for me it's a principle, and I agree with everything that's been said, that to attract the best talent, to recognize the value of the job, to recognize how the job has changed, and to send a message of the quality we want and the responsibilities of this work. Maryland wants to be the number one state in education. We want to be the number one state in business. We want to be the number one state in quality of life. We want to be the number one state in environmental protection. I don't think we can. I don't think that we want to be the number one state in terms of legislative compensation, but I think we could say, because of our expectations and the quality that we think we get, we want to be 80th percentile or 75th percentile, or we don't want to slip in ranking. Does that feel like it's a guidepost that this commission can agree on? I guess either by a show of hands or I'm not really making a motion, but I'm looking at a principle that we'd like to sort of try to do what we can to maintain where we are relative to other states. I don't think we want to slide. I guess I'm open to discussion whether we want to go up and be a top 10 state or a top 5 state, but I'm not sure that's reasonable. Does that sound like a guiding principle? Do anybody have any objections to that?
No objection.
Agreement that that's a guiding principle? Let's at least stay where we are, if we can.
Yeah, I'm comfortable being in the top quartile, as a goal, as a milestone, as a benchmark. And I think it's a valid, defendable principle. I don't know if it's my first talking point when somebody asks me, like, what did the commission do? And I say, well, we're in the top, quartile. Like, I'm more, the legislators work really hard. It's a full-time job. It's, their salaries don't keep pace with CPI, cost of living. They make less than the workforce does. And, it's competitive against other states. It's number 4 or 5 for me. It's not number 1.
I agree, Matt. I don't think I was throwing that out there as number 1 from a messaging standpoint, more as an internal working standpoint. And so
then we're in violent agreement.
The caveat is 100% well taken, that it's
Okay.
that it may not be the number one talking point, but so
I'm in agreement with Commissioner Gallagher on that, Chair.
thank
That,
you.
Would love to
Yeah.
see it increase and definitely not decrease.
Oh, we heard you. I heard you loud and clear. All right. So I think I'm open to suggestions on how so that's one standard. The other is where we know the state workforce has been, where we know employees have gotten increases, and what we, I guess, think they might be going forward as we develop a scenario. So we did have an exhibit on that, right, Philip? Of was it? I know it was 1% and 3% in the past 2 years. I can't remember which one was which.
For the employee increases.
Yes, sir.
Let me find that.
Joe, do you remember what exhibit number that was?
Are we talking about the ones at the very end? Last
I
two
think it
pages?
was toward the end. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's probably
46, 47
No, the baseline
of the baseline.
employee adjustments.
You mean 18?
Let's see.
Probably, yeah.
Looking at
Yeah,
18.
it's like 18 and 19.
All right, there we go. Yeah. All right, so if we look at 18 and 19. Cost of living. Let me ask a question just so I understand it. Is cost of living increase the same as a general salary increase? Are there two buckets? Is it salary increase slash COLA and step increase, or am I missing something in how state employee salaries work?
The step increases are merit-based. They generally are awarded. Cost of living is basically a across the board inflation factor.
And there's no other category of salary increase.
There have been limited instances. I believe 1 year there was a bonus as
Okay.
part of compensation. There have been I think outside of compensation, there have been instances where employees have been given some extra leave time, but
All right.
in terms of,
So but when we look at column 1 on exhibit 18 and the most recent years, 1% in 22, 23 was split in half. 24, 2%, 25, 3%. That's a COLA salary increase, but
Yes.
it hides a step increase, correct?
Correct. And let me actually, there's an exhibit from spending affordability. Let me see if I can share that. That may kind
Philip,
of,
I thought you had that stacked chart that had the by year, the COLA, and then the increment, so you could see it all.
yeah, there's let me see if I can pull this up.
So you just had it up.
Oh, did I? Let's see.
It was like yellow and blue, I think.
Yes. Spending affordable. This one? Hold on, let me. Yeah, here we go. Right, this is one of the appendices from spending affordability.
Yeah.
So this is, and then it's got the projected 26 and 27.
Salary increases. All right. And this is all right. Spending affordability 26. So 26 is man.
So these are fiscal years too. So
Yeah. Simon, how do we think? How should we be? I mean, members of the General Assembly don't get step increases; they only get a COLA. So, like, what's the apples to apples comparison of what a state employee gets to what a? I mean, and there might be the real one, but then also sort of the messaging one. But you know, I'm grappling with this right now.
I mean, I think the truth is there isn't an apples to apples comparison because the legislative salary is whatever the commission sets. And I think the issue has always been, okay, the commission doesn't want to be out of step with what's happening to regular state employees. And so there isn't a perfect comparison, but I think what you're showing, this chart specifically shows, is that between, in the last 4 years, the increase for state employees has been, from 23 through 26 is, if you add the increment, which is the 2.4%, has been, in the anywhere from almost 9% to 3.4 in 26. And the 2% in 27, because this is a spending affordability chart, the 2% in 27 is simply what's built into the prospective budget. That's just a placeholder. There's nothing that's kind of real about that number. It's just what's built into the budget.
Okay. So let me ask the question this way, and Matt, maybe you're a good one to weigh on this. And if we said, for the sake of argument, this is just a hypothetical. If this commission said we are recommending a 3% annual salary increase for the General Assembly, and the COLA increase turns out to be 2%, is that problematic? Is that an outlet? But the reality is state employees will be getting more because they'll get their step increases. So
I think it's a good question. And I mean, I want to preface this by saying I have no inside information on this. I don't want, don't read too much into this, but what I would say is the 2% that Simon alluded to in spending affordability, that is probably the working assumption, like at DBM and at DLS, in terms of what the COLA is going to be next year. Okay. And my guess is that the working assumption is that there will be some increment, that there will be an increment too. They might back off of that as they're considering really difficult decisions, but given the current fiscal outlook, given the current climate, I can't envision any scenario where there would be a COLA next year for the statewide workforce above 2%. That would seem to be, for me, there's no way there's going to be more than a 2% COLA. Now, that puts the increment issue on the side. There's going to be a separate question of whether or not there is an increment, yes or no. So I would say for the next year, in my mind, 2% would be the maximum action that I would feel comfortable recommending, given that would be the maximum COLA action that is going to happen for the vast majority of the workforce. So
the maximum you would be comfortable recommending as a member of this commission. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I think the most likely scenario is that there's either, a 2% COLA with no increment, or a 0 COLA, but they keep the increments, which means the vast majority of the workforce gets 2+% via an increment. And that if we were to recommend no more than 2% in the first year, I feel like we're going to be either the same or inside of whatever actions are going to be taken for state employees.
So what I had in mind, and I'm not good at math, so I looked at it.
So you're perfect for this commission.
That's right. I looked at it more in terms of whole numbers and percentages, and I looked at the 56,636, which is current, and then I looked at Exhibit 47 that looks at a 4.9% at the third of the column on the right, and I went under that, and I thought, why not make it 58,000 in 2027, and then 2,000 each additional year. So it'd be 58, 60, 62, and 64, which, as I figured out, even though I'm not good at math, was somewhere between 2 and 3%. It varies. You have to, again, I don't know how to figure out all that percentages, but that may be a little conservative, but it might be a little bit more than Matt was talking about. I'm not sure. I can't do the math, but it sure seems simple to me.
It is simple, and simplicity is great. Matt did also raise the point earlier in our discussion that he had a more of a comfort level with backloading us. And Tom, what you outlined might be, if someone wants to run the percentages, might be, I mean, it might be generally aligned with that, or we could figure out a way to generally align with that to get to the 64 possible.
Or you can make it 60, you can make it 2,000. I mean, start with 58, make it 2,000 in 2028, and then 3,000 the next 2 years, which would make it 63 and 65. That may be too generous. I don't know, but that's how I look at it.
All right.
As a reasonable approach.
Yep. So I'm going to ask for the James. Oh, I see. There are hands up now. I was going to call James. I'll call on you. I was going to go for the James and Dr. Pierce side of Matt's very well reasoned conservatism.
Well, I was actually going to kind of echo what Matt said about backloading it. I mean, I think because where we are financially right now, if we come to a conclusion of where we eventually want to get to, then it probably does make sense to do it in a manner that, does it in the out years. We can still accomplish what we want to get to and get to an ultimate, pinnacle. But do it in a manner that, knowing what the face is stating over the next year or two, and hopefully that's it. We can still get there and look like being reasonable, but doing it in a way that's also understanding of the current economic and fiscal situation that we're in, was the only point I was going to make.
Yep. Thank you. Simon.
Thanks. I mean, my feeling is, like Matt's feeling is that we should definitely, if the consensus is to provide an increase, backload it. I mean, 2% in the first year is about $1,100. Takes you to about 55.5. It doesn't take you to 58. 58 is a pretty significant increase, and I think we should definitely consider not front loading it and being quite conservative in the first years, because the problem is that the legislature is going to get the commission's recommendations, and if the recommendations are too high up front, they're just going to get rejected. I think so. I think we have to be mindful of the fact that it is extremely likely that next year's budget is going to be tight. After that, who knows? I mean, it's hard to say, but certainly in the first year, I would very much caution 2% as a maximum increase.
Simon, did you do the math? What 2% gets us to as a number? So it's 50. What is it now? 55.
2% gets you to about. It's 50 right now. It's 54,437, right?
Is that what it is?
24, right?
The 24, the 26 salary is 56,636.
Okay, so that gets you to about 57.5.
56. Give me that again, Philip, please.
56,636.
6,636. So Simon, what is 2%?
Okay, so 2%. I guess 2% does get you close to 58 then. So that's my bad. I was looking at
57, 7, 68, 72.
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of where I would prefer. I might even prefer to go a little lower, because in the first year,
lower than 2%. All right.
But then back it out. 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of thing. I mean, I think.
Right.
It's just. But because I do think that will keep the salaries at least where they are now relative to other states. which I think is important. I mean, I hear what everybody else has said on that. I think that's important. But I think the first year is going to be probably pretty tough.
Just, I don't want to jump the line, but I just want to make one clarification point, just because having gone through this before. You obviously, like Commissioner Slater recommended, like we could make it a dollar amount as opposed to a percentage. And, it's not going to be hard to, reverse engineer that and figure out what the calculation is. Some of the other commissions go the dollar amount route because they're being mindful of compression issues among like categories of judges and, comparing some of the constitutional officers to each other. It's a little bit different, I think, when the General Assembly side, because there's not like the same compression issue in terms of like classifications of judges or jobs. So I think historically, it doesn't mean you have to do this going forward. I think it's usually been expressed in percentage terms as opposed to real dollar terms. So, just to follow up on what Commissioner Powell said, I've been just running scenarios like on my calculator here, and I was thinking about like years 1 and 2 between 1.5% and 2%, and years 3 and 4 between 2% and 3%. And my thinking on that was that 1.5% to 2%, I think, is going to fall below or be equal to either the COLA or the step. And that, if we were going to front load or if we were going to backload, that even at 3% as a max, like in years 3 or 4, we would still typically be below the standard COLA and the standard step, like when combined. Like, so that, like, if I thought about like 1.5% to 2% for the first 2 years and 2% to 3% for the last 2 years, I think that that's meaningful, but still conservative within kind of the norms of the actions that are likely to be taken. But I don't want to jump ahead of anybody else, and I know Commissioner had a
James, did you intend to have your hand up still?
Sorry about that. I did not. I'm
Okay.
technologically not as advanced as others. I'll figure this out in a second.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Jacob had just messaged me while we were talking that the assumption is no increments for fiscal 27. So that's the assumption. We'll see what happens in the budget.
Gotcha. Right. So then, to Matt's point, if we were at 1.75%, that would be less than what we think is built in as a COLA for state employees. If we were,
yeah, I mean, you have
between 1 and 2, or 1.5 and 2, as he said. This is turned into a bit of a grim conversation. Does anybody want to turn it in a forceful argument to turn it in the other direction? I mean,
there's and I'm not making this recommendation. 2233, okay, with compounding is over a 10% increase over 4 years. It's not nothing,
right?
But it's like it fits within norms, and I think it's defensible, like under the current fiscal conditions, and it also, to some extent, like banks on like the state always does, as Simon said, we balance the budget, we figure it out, we get it done.
Matt, you just negotiated yourself up a little bit, I think.
Well, no, that was the top of the range. That was the top of the range I felt comfortable with. But if you want 1.5, 2, that's a 7.2% increase over 4 years. 2233 is like a 10.4% increase over 4 years. So that just gives you a sense of like the range there.
I was thinking, as I'm doing things for the market signal and the messaging, if we were at 1.75, and then 2.5, 3, what that got. But that was just me kind of mediating a little bit.
Yeah, I think that puts you south. I think that puts you south of 10. But I'd have to run, I didn't run that one.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, I want to go back to, what was it, Exhibit 14? Not that we're going to get anyplace else, because I don't think we are, but I mean, I think one concern or one discussion point I'd like to have. Exhibit 14, I think.
Is that this one?
Yeah, the last column was 23 to was it 20?
So we have
hold on, 23 to 24.
Yeah.
Hold on, no, that
so
was
we have the percent changes here ranked.
yes, yeah. But there was the one that had the percent changes of the states that were above us in salary. So there it is. Yeah, it is Exhibit 14. Yeah, 21 to 24. So Alaska 66%, Illinois 28%, California 11 over 4-year periods, New York 30 for 29.9, Hawaii 18, Massachusetts 4.4. And is that was Massachusetts full time?
Yeah, most of these are full time. Massachusetts is full time. California, New York, Pennsylvania,
All right.
Michigan, Massachusetts, Illinois, Ohio, Hawaii, Wisconsin, and Alaska.
I guess when I look at this, and then Maryland at 8. So 2233, Matt, you said puts us at 10, which is actually higher. This is a point for Dr. Pierre and James, maybe. Puts us higher. I know she's shaking her head. Sorry. I know you're despondent, aren't you? Ahead of what the previous commission recommended.
No, I mean the previous.
Well, how can I get 2244 is that compounds
2233, I think, is 10.4 compounded.
Yeah, so these are the 24. So these are not the.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. This is a different time frame, a different 4-year period.
Right.
This includes some of those zeros. I got you. All right.
Well,
right.
the data available for the other states to do as close to an apples to apples. We had to go through 24.
Right. I think I'm going to open the floor a little bit if anybody wants to sort of weigh in something differently, because I think we might be getting close to saying to staff, which I think the commission has done in the past, give us A, B, and C, A being very conservative, B being B, and C being a more aggressive schedule. And then when I feel like we should kind of set those parameters and ask staff to present that to us. Anybody want to have additional discussion of where we are right now?
All the points, we're not very far apart, I don't think.
Yeah. What do we think? Should we? Anybody want to make a motion on what our B level of our mid-level sort of option might be at this point, given what our discussion is? I'll entertain as chair. I will entertain a motion.
What's the A level? What?
Well, I think it might be. I think the A might be. I think I'd like to know the B first, and then see what the A would be higher than that. That's my thinking.
Okay, 1.5, 1.5, 2.5, 2.5.
That's your motion. That's your motion for
that's
B.
8.3 compounded. That's my middle proposal. That's the low end. That's the middle. I'm sorry, that's the middle. Like for me, I'm bounded by 1.5 and 3.
Yeah.
And
you said 1.5, 1.5, 2.5, 2.5. That's your B level proposal.
That's my B. That's my mid-range. It's my
Yeah,
mid-size.
that's your mid-range, right?
That's my mid-size sedan. My luxury sedan
Yeah.
is two.
Well, hold on, before we get to that, before we get to
2233.
that,
I
I
know.
wasn't asking for that, wasn't asking for that.
Okay.
Anybody want to second that as a mid proposal?
I'll second.
And Simon had his finger up too. All right, so let's have that for discussion. Any folks want to? Who wants to comment on that? I'm happy to take a vote. We don't have to follow Robert's Rules of Order, but I'm happy to take a vote on this. Any other discussion on that as what we think is a reasonable mid-range, given what we discussed?
I think a reasonable mid-range should be anywhere from the 175 that Commissioner Gallagher originally had expressed, but really in the perfect world, 2%. And on the top range, 3%. So that's where I stand.
Thank you. We might have a lot of lawmakers scowling at us when we come back at 1.5%, if that's what we did. All right, so we had a second. 1.5, 1.5, 2.5, 2.5 is mid.
But we're not actually voting on what we're going to propose, right? You're just
No,
saying,
we're not. No, we're just we're proposing this. No, we're not. We're not. I'm weighing in my mind whether I want to make an argument for 1.75, 1.75 for the first 2 years.
well, why don't we
That-
have the
that-
staff do figures for something lower than 1.5, then 1.75, and then 2, and 4 different
that would
charts,
make it 4,
which
yeah.
would show the salary.
So Tom, are you saying that you were living with the top end being 2233?
Something
I
like
think, and that's also what Dr. Pierre just kind of said too, right? Like that's our grim gold standard for what we're giving the hardworking members of the General Assembly. Yeah.
I think that's still pretty aggressive, to be honest with you. I mean, I think at the bargaining table, most of the units would take that in a second right now, given the fiscal outlook of the state. Now, then there'd be a whole separate fight over increments. But everybody and their mother outside of Sleola would take 2233 right now. So that's why I had that as my outer range. And
That's right.
I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying
Understood.
that's as far as I could see going right now.
All right. So for a decision document, I think what I hear to staff is that outer range is 2233. And mid-range, or I guess we've got 2 middle ranges of. Now, I don't know how we're going to decide among the middle. Are we looking at total dollar amount? Or I guess we're waiting to see the extra data points we have, sort of December 31st and spending affordability.
Mr. Chair,
yes,
I may be out of order to ask this, but is there anyone that's higher than what I recommended? Just wondering.
I'm not. Anybody over your 2233, Dr. Pierre? Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I guess you could go. I guess you could go 2234 in that they got a 4, in the current cycle, and with that's less than what the last commission recommended, but more than I mean, it would not be unreasonable to put in 2234, but it might appear a little aggressive. Tom, I'm sorry, I cut you off as you were talking.
No,
It was
that
actually
I
it
was
was
just
James.
gonna,
Okay.
yeah, I was just gonna echo Dr. Pierre. I'd be comfortable at that level. I don't know about going above it, but I'm certainly comfortable with it.
So someone mentioned earlier, and I don't know enough about the legislature to opine on this, but what is the danger of if we propose too high an increase of the legislature not accepting it. I mean, what's the political pressure in today's climate that might cause that to happen?
I don't know. I think that makes them look good, right? If we went too high and they rejected it, you know, they look like fiscal conservatives and we look like
Yeah, but we don't keep pace. I mean, I think that would be a disaster from my point of view as to what I think needs to happen in order to allow adequate compensation for the legislature. And if we propose something too high and they see it as they look good because they're being fiscally conservative, but
oh, I guess the question is, do they only have a binary option, either accepted or rejected, or they cannot vote on their own salaries, right? Or could they vote on a specific number that is lower?
They can reduce.
Yeah.
They can't increase, so they can reject, they can accept, they can reduce, but they can't go higher than. So you all are setting the high bar.
Joe, can I just ask a quick question of I guess Philip? So if they reject our proposal, they can amend the bill down, revote it, and pass it for anything lower than what we put on the table, but nothing higher. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, they would introduce their own resolution to lower from you all this commission's recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
And then there would be a ton of debate to go to zero, right? There'd be a third of the legislature that says we can't, that we shouldn't pay ourselves anything more if we went high. That would be an ugly floor debate as they amend that resolution. All right. So
could I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
Does this go through the regular committee process? Or does this go straight to the floor?
So the commission recommendations will be to adopt a resolution that gets read across in both the House and Senate. If the legislature takes no action, the commission's resolution just takes effect. If any changes would have to be done through a resolution process, which would flow through like a piece of legislation.
Thank you.
Staff, what do you suggest we need to do additionally today to have you prepare a decision document for us?
The only thing I had for follow-up from last time, there was a question about for expense reimbursements. There's language in the current resolution.
Before we go to that, in terms of
sorry.
in terms of scenarios for percent increase, do you have what you need based on this discussion? I know we didn't vote but there was a consensus on a middle ground.
So yeah, what I've heard is as a middle ground option, year 1, 1.5%, year 2, 1.5%, and then 2.5% in each of years 3 and 4. And then the other, what's been noted as the highest amount would be 2.233.
Yeah.
That's all I've heard. I didn't know if there was another scenario that you all wanted to run.
Yeah. Should we have a lower one than that, just in case? A 1.122 on the low end. All right, let's say yes. We have 3: 1.122, 1.5, 1.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.233.
2.233. Okay.
And again, making clear, we're going to meet in January. We're going to have additional information of what happened with the economic reopenings of the bargaining units. We're going to have the Spending Affordability Commission's report. And just remind me, I can't keep the date straight in my head when the governor needs to introduce his budget. That's after
when we have to act, I think, isn't it?
Okay. All right. So we still won't have that. But we will have plenty of time for as robust a discussion as you want in person with alcohol flowing freely. Now, that part is a joke. Alcohol will not be flowing freely during that discussion.
I mean, Mr. Chair, I might suggest that like when we meet for the third time, like these are relatively like easy scenarios, like, you know, in terms of like what the, you know, the amount is and the percentage and the compounding. That like if we're going to be meeting in person and we're in a room and there's going to be a screen, like it might be a good idea to have like a spreadsheet open with the scenarios so that if we want to make
Just in real time.
yeah, like if there's a scenario 1.5 or 2.5 between 1 and 2 and 2 and 3,
Right.
we'll be able in real time with just a couple of keystrokes be able to see what that looks like and compounds out to. That might be helpful to the decision-making process, particularly if we have the new information of whatever the wage reopener settled at.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like that idea. Thanks. And to be clear, the sensitivity is kind of just showing us the total increase over 4 years with the compounding, right? We don't, I guess we'll know what the overall dollar amount is too, right? Because it is 144 members or 188 members of the General Assembly. Okay. Expenses. Should we move on? Is everybody comfortable moving on to expenses or to another topic? We've only got 12 minutes left of our scheduled time.
All right, let me. On that, last time there was a question related to provisions for the member expenses, largely for travel. There was a question about, so there are the general policy, as you'll see here. So this is for during session item 2A. The general policy is the president speaker would establish guidelines. And then there is language further down that restricts lodging expenses to the most current published Federal General Services Administration. There was question as to whether that language could be problematic if there was an issue with updates to the GSA rates. So, and then further down for item 2D, this is out-of-state travel. So there's, again, you have the same language that the President and Senate shall develop the guidelines. And then you have language further down. This language actually, there is kind of a release valve here. So there is language here that you have it limited to the GSA rates, but the presiding officers can approve lodging that exceeds the GSA rate to whatever the published conference rate is. So if somebody's going to a conference out of state, I think it's approved, but the conference hotel rates are above the GSA rate. There is an exception in here. So for the out of state, it's not as hard a limitation. And so, you know, just that came up last time. This is the language. And if anyone has any ideas of, you know, whether you need to take any action on that.
So are we, is this commission making a recommendation on the actual per diem or not? I think I'm
historically, no, I mean, historically it's linked to external factors. So there's state travel regulations and then the GSA rates are generally what's followed, and those adjust each year. So they're generally defaulted to external rates.
Simon?
Yeah, I was the one who brought this up because I was concerned about incorporating by reference standards the federal government set and whether they're going to be updated. But actually, having read through again the specifics of the resolution, I think there's enough wiggle room in there that it's not something that I think it's not going to be an issue. So my concern about it is certainly not there. And I'm comfortable with the way it's currently done in terms of referencing the GSA standards, given the fact that there's also wiggle room to make exceptions to that. So thanks to Phil for following up on that, but I'm comfortable with the way that reads.
Thank you.
And then the only other items that came up last time were the provision. These are for their pension benefits. There is this language here. This is the purchase of service provision. This would add the December 31 deadline during the next term. And then the other piece was adding in the line of duty death benefit. That language, there are a few cross references. So there are multiple death benefits that are available. So we have cross references that if the line of duty were to be paid, the other benefits, so just to prevent double payment or confusion. And then that would be a new section 23. And all this language mirrors language that you will see in the other state plans. I've checked with state retirement on this. They have not identified any issues. They've checked with tax council. They're fine with this language if the commission is intending to make the legislative plan consistent with the other plans.
Thank you.
And then the only other item I flagged for you was the retiree health benefits, but that was more just to kind of note that the existing policy is to be consistent with how state employees are treated. And so it was more just to note that so it's on the record.
Thank you. Philip, is our January meeting date set, or were we deciding?
No, we need to do that. So the dates we were looking at were January 14th, which is a Wednesday, and January 15th, the Thursday. The 14th is the first day of session. I think I had initially blocked out. So the first day of session should be starting at noon. I initially was unsure whether I would be available. I should not have any issue if I need to be present for you all, because the special session that happened on Tuesday took care of the veto overrides. So that is something that I will not have to be available for on the first day of session, if depending on when the commission wants to meet.
Is it a good idea or not to meet on the first day of session for logistics and parking and, or does it not matter day one versus day two? Anybody have a thought?
Day 2 would be a preference of mine.
Which date?
So you were looking at the 14th and 15th, and this is based on, I think there were some members who were traveling out of the country and we're not going to be available until then. So these were the two earliest dates.
Full disclosure, I'm one of those people. I'm out of the country in early January and coming and back on the 10th, unfortunately. So I do apologize for any inconvenience that presents, but it's a long planned trip in early January.
Mr. Chair, could we then get together the week of the 12th, like the 12th, 13th, or 14th? I'm available.
So I think that those are the days we're looking at.
Oh, I thought you said the 14th or 15th.
The 14th and 15th were the dates based on responses I got on availability. If that's changed, we can look at any dates that work for everybody.
No, I'm out of town until the 12th.
I think the 15th. I mean, I have like Dr. Pierre, I'd have a slight preference for the 15th if that works for folks.
You said you have a preference for the 15th?
I do, yeah.
I have something at noon. And would this happen in the morning? How long do you think?
Well, right. I mean, that's a good question. Or is it, or do we not need, let me throw this out there. Do we not need to meet in person? Should we do it via Zoom again? I mean, previously we've had I think the first meeting of this commission has been in person and the subsequent ones were virtual. I'd love to shake y'all's hands and be in person. I like being in Annapolis, so I'm happy to do it. We could also say the 14th, the first day, and go to. I'm open to. I think I'm open to anything that week: 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th.
Yeah, we probably try. I mean, because the has to be read
Printing.
across
Right,
within
right.
15 days. So the
Yeah,
15th is probably that is
that's the last day. Okay.
My
Right.
2 cents is if we can get in there and out of there before session starts, we're gonna do all of ourselves a favor, is just my 2 cents as far as chaos parking, availability of rooms probably, but that's just my preference. But
Meaning even before Wednesday or before meaning Tuesday the 13th. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Wilder, you said you're out of town until when?
No, the 13th is fine. I
13th,
can't do the 12th, but the 13th is okay.
again, how long is the meeting anticipated to be? A couple hours?
I think maybe I'm gonna say 90 minutes based on our experience as a group.
I'm okay on the 13th as long as it's in the morning. I have a noon thing to go to in Annapolis, so.
Yep. Philip,
Right.
is 90 minutes or Simon, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I'm not available on the 13th. I blocked the 14th, 15th, and 16th based on
Gotcha.
previous, but
Yep.
the
All right.
13th I'm not, unfortunately.
All right. Well, then let's cut it close and just say the 15th in the morning.
yeah, I have a conflict at 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
Tom does as well, but I mean, as long as I need to leave Annapolis
But
11:15.
by 11, right? So, I mean, do you
Yeah, I
want to
can
try
do
to
the
say?
morning 15th.
All right, so let's do the morning in the 15th. What time are folks comfortable starting? 8:30, 9, 8?
Anytime. It's fine with me. Earlier the better.
I'm good.
8:30? Earlier? Tom, what time you want to meet based on you're the one who has to travel. What time do you want to meet?
I think, I'm not sure about my meeting. It's supposed to be noon. I'm not sure whether it's in person or by Zoom, but earlier, 8:30 or 9 would work.
All right. Block 8:30 to 10 on Thursday the 15th in Annapolis.
Okay.
Do we know where this meeting will take place?
I will get that to you. I need to find us a room based on other meetings since we're in session, but I should be able to do that at least by early next week, and then we'll get out all the info on where to go. And then since it's during session, I would advise whatever, if we're going with an 8:30 time, build yourself in a little time getting into the building, going through security, coming into whatever room.
Right. Philip, is this okay? Do you want to adjust that at all? Do you have any 8:30 to 10 on Thursday, or
I mean, once session starts, for me, it's and staff, it shouldn't be an issue. 8:30 might actually help you all a little bit on traffic.
Okay.
Typically, the session on Thursday would be 10 a.m., but early in session 2, those go very quick, and they may even be doing pro forma. We won't know until then.
Yeah. Okay. So let's hold 8:30 in Annapolis with the goal of wrapping it up within 90 minutes, if possible. All right. Anything else to discuss? No? All right. Staff, thanks for your work. Yes, go ahead. Commissioner Cyrus.
Thank you. I know we asked about getting, having the spreadsheet capability on screen, but can we get those calculations
Yes.
to us ahead of time, as
Yep.
well as any update from the spending affordability group? So
Yes.
we could just be, running when we get there.
Yep, we'll prepare a decision document, and as part of that, we'll have the 3 scenarios that you've identified, and then also at the meeting, we'll have a tool available where we can adjust on the fly as needed. So the decision document will have all of the decision points that'll mostly track that summary document. I sent you, I think it was chapter 3 from the last report, giving the kind of item by item summary of the resolution. So all of that will be baked into that, and you'll have that in advance.
Thank you.
And just to confirm, I think it's obvious, but that the presiding officer's schedule follows the same percentages. I don't think there's a need to do a different percentage there, correct?
That was my
I guess
assumption.
that's our decision, but that's, you know, I assume that's how it's historically been.
Historically, I believe it's tracked. Yeah, they have the higher range, but the
The
increase.
higher, right. But commissioners comfortable with that, with that these percentages flow through to the presiding officers as well?
Yes,
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.